This is the seventh video lecture on the topic of psychological disorders. In this lecture, I want to briefly outline the conditions associated with dissociative disorders and schizophrenia. Dissociative disorders are otherwise known as split personality or multiple personality disorders. I will say that different scholars disagree if there's such a thing. There's not consensus if there is such a thing as dissociative disorder. But the idea is that the person, so if we think back to, we didn't cover the chapter on personality, but when we think about what personality is, and that is defined as patterns of behavior and thought that are consistent across time and place, the idea is that a person can have such variation in their ways of being and ways of interaction and ways of thinking and ways of feeling that it is considered a different personality. Now, there are different kinds of disassociation that you have may experienced, right? So when we were talking about the topic of consciousness, and there was the idea of hypnosis and meditation, or when you space out, those are examples of disassociation. So when it becomes a dissociative disorder, the idea is that you space out to the extent, to the degree that you are a unique person and that you have different behavior or different memories and different ways of being. You may take on a different voice. You may have a different identity. So again, there is some disagreement. I would argue that we all experience these disassociative experiences. So if you look at the slide, the same way when we were talking about anxiety and mood disorders, there's these degrees of disassociation. So a dissociative experience is when you've had this experience where you just you feel like you're in another person. You feel like you're in another state of consciousness, right? A lot of people describe like drugs as putting them in this dissociative experience, like LSD or psychedelics like that, where they feel like they're floating outside their body, or they feel like they're a different person. I've not had any of these experiences, so I don't have the right words to go with them. Dissociative amnesia is a phenomena where you have, usually it's associated with trauma, where you have an experience where you just like, a common one is probably a car accident. I remember pulling up to the stoplight, and the next thing I remember, I was waking up in a hospital. So not only do you black out or blank out or space out during that time, but you don't remember any of it, right? So you remember this moment and you remember that moment, but nothing in between. Or maybe you feel like, people might say it felt like it was a dream, right? Those are disassociative. A dissociative fugue, I think is how we say it. If you, in the first season of Breaking Bad, Walter White has one of these. Again, they're commonly associated with trauma or stress, but they're the amnesia state, but when an individual wanders away. So a person may have a trauma, like Walter White, he found out he had cancer. This caused a lot of stress. He wandered away, and they found him walking around naked in a grocery store. In the storyline, he was faking it, blah, blah, blah. But the point is that these are traumatic. These are usually followed by trauma. They are where you space out, you forget who you are, and you wander, right? And so there's so one of them is just that space out experience. One of them is the space out experience with the amnesia. One of them is the space out experience with the amnesia and the wandering. That's the third. And usually, again, these are associated with trauma. There's been like the story of Sybil, who supposedly has 6 personalities. There was one on Netflix. There was a TV show on Netflix for a while that I enjoyed called United States of Terra. And she was a person who had 6 personalities. And what you would see in that I think is probably kind of legit, is a phenomena where whenever she was under stress, a certain aspect of her, certain personality would dominate her behavior. Kind of like I think we all do when we say things like, you know, I'll just use myself. So I have this very nurturing mother aspect, but I also have a an angry lioness aspect to me when I feel like my kids are being threatened. You have like a good kid, you know, the good kid in you. You know, we talked about that when we were talking about consciousness. The last disorder I want to talk about is schizophrenia. And a couple important points to point out in schizophrenia that will show up on a quiz. And that is that schizophrenia is associated with both what we call positive and negative symptoms. These are not good and bad symptoms, but a positive and a negative symptom refers to additional symptoms. That would be a positive, and a negative symptom is something that they lack. So a positive symptom is probably the ones that you're most familiar with. Those are hallucinations and delusions. Hallucinations are when you think you hear something or see something, or in some rare cases, you feel things. The most common hallucination for schizophrenic is hearing. So they hear voices. This is different than the Johnny Cash voice that I have in my head, because I know that's Johnny Cash. But for the schizophrenic, they don't know that that is, they associate that as if they are genuinely being told to do something. A classic case of was the son of Sam. He was a serial killer, and he had hallucinations and delusions. He believed that the dog, his next door neighbor's dog, was talking to him and was telling him to kill people. So the hallucination is he believed the dog was talking to him. A delusion is a false belief. Usually delusions are associated with grandeur. So people are deluded. They have additional thoughts that lead them to believe that they are, a common one is that they believe they are the son of God. Or I had a friend one time who believed he was a wizard, or they believe they are, I don't know, aliens that and you might believe that you have been abducted by aliens, and you might also have had hallucinations that you've seen aliens, right? So it's these false beliefs, and again, usually they're associated with you are something more than you already are. So my friend who was a wizard would believe that when you come up to a stoplight, you know, and the stoplight turns green, which it does sometimes for us, oh, how great, what a convenient. He believed that that was because he was a wizard and he was making that happen. So I would argue that's, most of us don't think that, and therefore that's an extra, that's a positive symptom. Schizophrenia is most commonly, if a person is going to develop schizophrenia or have schizophrenia, they're going to show the first signs in their 20s. And this is what we call a schizophrenic break. And it is a break from reality, or a break from sanity. I'm trying to think the other word that's often referred to. And with all of these disorders, I may have said this in another video, is that these things, if you get out of your 20s and you've not experienced any of these phenomena, you're good to go, right? Most of these disorders will show up in your 20s. And again, think about that as, this is when, remember, your brain is moving from the back, is developing from the back to the front. So not until your brain is fully developed are we going to start seeing some of these disorders. I think it actually says that in here about what the time is, early 20s. And then the negative effects associated with, negative symptoms associated with schizophrenia are things that a schizophrenic person doesn't have. And these would be like an affect. And affect is how your voice changes when you get excited, and it speeds up and it slows down and it gets higher and it gets lower, right? As a way of demonstrating emotion. Or you have emotions, right? You show happiness or sadness, or, you know, a schizophrenic has no affect. It's very monotone. There's no up, there's no down. It's all just the same. And that's also similarly another schizophrenic negative symptom is when people move or talk very slowly, as if they're buffering, right? So I don't want you to think I was buffering. Okay. And then the next one really just talks about some of the different types and prevalences It does seem to run in families. There's some speculation that the older fathers are, their children are more likely to develop schizophrenia. It is considered a significant disability because many schizophrenic people are never able to live a sort of non-medicated, fully engaged life. So it is a serious disorder. A friend of mine has two grown daughters, and they both are schizophrenic. And her doctor told her that she shouldn't worry too much right now because the voices are not telling them bad. So she's hearing voices. They have that positive symptom of hallucinations, but the voices are not telling them to hurt themselves. They're saying positive things. So yeah, yay for that. Okay, and then the last item in our chapter is a little box on well-being. And I don't even think that your textbook discusses this, but I think this is an important thing to point out because so much of what psychology is about illness and what's wrong with people, but positive psychology, and there's another sort of subset of positive psychology, the humanist psychology. We don't want to lose sight that we can also use the psychological understanding to help people be better. And this is just a list, 1, 2, 3, 6 items that we know to be associated with well-being. And they all boil down to, I think, and if I can use the language of my faith tradition, they all boil down to grace. They all boil down to cut yourself some slack, right? Give yourself a break. Accept yourself for who you are and accept each other for who they are. Find a reason to get up in the morning and move towards becoming the best version of yourself, right? That's all Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization. I think we did that in another chapter, right? Self-actualization. Where are you? And accept your good things and your bad things. Cut yourself a little bit of slack. If you're not getting straight A's right now, this is just how you are. Do your best to maintain some relationships with people and cut them some slack too. Find something you're good at and be good at it. And yeah, so self-acceptance, positive autonomy. Autonomy, remember, refers to self-direction. Find something, or this is the ability to choose, to be able to choose what you do when you get up in the morning. Environmental mastery, something you're good at. Find a reason to exist. I mean, that's one of those hallmarks of depression. And then try new things. Try new things you might be good at. And if you're not good at it, say, well, not good at that. Let's move on. Okay, friends. This wraps up this chapter and this slide, and that's all I got. So the last item on the agenda will be a final exam. Thanks for listening.